This is Nicole Sauce from the Holler Homestead giving you a woman's take on the walk towards independence because we're living free in Tennessee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, February 13th, 2017, and this is episode 23 of Living Free in Tennessee. And today we'll talk through our regular sections and then take some time to review 4 strategies for managing a busy spring on the homestead without losing your mind. Okay, well, without losing all of your mind. Maybe you'll only lose half of it. And the problem is that spring has begun to bloom a bit early this year. And with it, a dangerous situation is in the works in Tennessee. This dangerous situation is the potential for an early April deep freeze. And what if it doesn't freeze? What if we just go straight from here into spring and it no longer gets below about 26 degrees and we land in a super hot, extra blazing May that kills all my peas? These are the questions that are coming up for many homesteaders in Middle Tennessee. And could that happen? You bet it could. And if you're in more northern climates, I'm so sorry for you. I know you're covered in snow right now. And there's a solution to that involves moving. It was 70 here yesterday. Our daffodils are blooming. Our trees are budding out. Our bees are madly bringing pollen to their nests. I did not go in this weekend, but that might actually indicate that we could get swarms already. They've already started in Texas, and I'm just one person on a homestead, starting a new business with a full-time job and limited time. So it seemed like a good time to review how we make it through the next 3 months without losing our mind. Also today, we are pausing the Toby Hemingway segment from Gaia's Garden because the show is already sort of long. I've been nose in on my computer all weekend long, laying out the newspaper that goes to print in 2 days. And I want to make sure I do a good job with you on that segment and really haven't had enough time to absorb Chapter 6. So we'll pick up with Chapter 6 next week. And hey, if you want to drop me a question, topic idea, or comment, feel free to email me at nicolesauce@gmail.com. It's about time for another Savings Ninja segment. So if you have questions for Samantha about strategies for saving money, shopping better, or just plain old budgeting, drop me a line and I'll get it to her so that she can drop us the next segment. And now on to our regularly scheduled content. You know, it occurred to me, those of you who listen to this for the first time today or have just started in a few recent episodes, we've had some growth. You may have no idea what the segments are or why we have them. And, well, it goes something like this. Living on a homestead requires a different, more simple approach to living, eating, and planning. In the first few episodes, I was haphazardly sharing some of our experiences, and people asked me for a bit more information as they move into their own living off the land experience, or as they think about, hey, do I want to buy a little farm or a homestead? Maybe I should hear what it's like for other people. And the cool thing about changing how we live and sharing it as you go is that things like this, living simpler, storing what you eat, eating what you store, growing what you eat, eating what you grow, it can apply in the city too. You can put up some food of your own. You can grow some fresh things in containers in almost any situation, and you can build more stability into your life by doing that. Even my mom, when she was living on a houseboat, grew culinary herbs. That's all she had room for, and she made some really yummy food on that boat with fresh herbs without having to pay like $3 or $4 for a little teeny bunch. So today, along with each segment, I wanted to share with you a bit about the background of the segments just for people who are new. So first up, we have eating seasonally. And this is where we share what we're eating as it comes to us. In the winter, things really do slow down, so I also talk about what is growing in the woods and that we can eat that just sort of augments our food for free, having done nothing to make it grow. And sometimes I throw in garden items, but not for much longer because pretty soon we'll have a standalone wild foraging section again, and then we'll talk about how we're preserving what's coming off the land. But right now I've mixed those two together into the eating seasonally section. And here is what we're eating seasonally this week. It's wild garlic and watercress, just like last week. They've really come into their own. I still haven't made my wild garlic shallot soup, and this may be the week. The paper is about put to bed, and part of why I haven't been doing anything but cooking as quickly as possible, like the pot roast in the crock pot stew sorts of thing, also known as holler stew, has been a staple because you can just throw everything in a crock pot and walk away and it works. Eggs. I have launched my subscriptions. Last week I was saying, oh no, I'm behind. And the first subscription is being delivered today. I can only handle 5 subscribers for both kinds of eggs. So we have chicken and duck. And the first one sold. It's a duck egg subscription. And I have a few people interested in just trying duck eggs for the first time. So we're getting some people some standalone duck egg orders out. And we have so many eggs here that it's time to make deviled eggs and other eggy dishes. In fact, Fat Tuesday is coming. And we're totally doing crepes next week. So that's coming off the Homestead. Jerusalem artichokes. I went to dig out the carrots and ended up with a whole bunch of Jerusalem artichokes. So put some aside to move around the yard because they basically grow themselves here. I love how they taste. People do call them fartichokes, ha ha ha, because they give some people gas. And there are different methods for getting rid of the gas factor, including taking an enzyme. I've never really had that issue with them, but I also haven't sat down and eaten like 20 pounds of them in one sitting. I grate them on salads with no problem at all. I boil them and make them into purees. I include them sautéed with stir fries. They're just really good. And so I was kind of excited when they started popping out of the ground in my carrot patch. Also, they're my carrot patch because Jerusalem artichokes walk all over your yard. Once you put them in, they're kind of like mint. They just keep going. So I don't feel bad about harvesting those because I don't want them in there anyway. And then this is exciting. The dead nettle is starting to peek up at me in the yard. Dead nettle is not stinging nettle, it's dead nettle. I think that's why they call it dead. It looks like a nettle plant, might even be in the nettle family. It has a square stem and the bees absolutely love it when it gets a little older. But dead nettle is an early spring green that you can eat. And it doesn't taste bad. Like, it just kind of takes on the taste of anything around it. I pull the leaves off the stems. The stems, well, when I'm in a hurry, I just cut up the stems really small and hope it's not too chewy. But the stems can be a little chewy. So dead nettle's starting to peek up at me. Pretty sure that means that we're coming on some chickweed here soon. But if Mother Nature decides to snow, which could also still happen this season, then maybe beat all of that back. But I'm going to start having some fun spring greens to share with you guys in the wild food section. Okay, next up we have getting the gardens ready. This is a new segment I added last week because it's time to share what we're doing to get our food growing operation up and running. And I have, first off, a sweet potato slip update. It was a surprise when I looked at 2 of the jars I had left over from the sweet potatoes I told you last week are not rooting out in my mason jars, and saw a little root coming off of one of them. So now I have a sweet potato that was grown on my property last year that will be giving us slips, and I have the start of one that I bought from a local farmer that might also give us sweet potato slips. That's great because sweet potatoes make the best summer greens. They also make great sweet potatoes, but the summer green aspect of the sweet potato is something I love to do. You know, when it's a little too warm for kale and your Swiss chard's looking sad, your sweet potato greens are going strong, and you can just saute them up with peppers and other things that are coming on in your garden. So looks like the Holler Homestead will have sweet potato slips, and I'll let you all know if we have some to share. And there's more on this section to come in our main content because I am talking about strategies for prioritizing, and I will be bringing examples up from the homestead, so why do it twice? The other thing about getting your gardens ready is it's a good time of year to learn skills. And there are a number of workshops that are starting to pop up about how to do this or how to do that. And our friends over at Cider Hollow Farm in Savannah, Tennessee have a crafting workshop coming up. It's a half day. So if you're way out here 3 hours from there, you're going to have to get up early to get there by 9, but not too early. It starts at 9, ends around 2 p.m., and I might bring a big old pot of Holler Homestead stew to share. We'll see. But the cost is $45. Do bring a lunch, just in case. But I probably will bring some extra food too. Cost, as I said, is $45, and the registration link is in the show notes. But if you want to go straight to this person's website, it's ciderhollow.com. Really easy to find. You click over on events, and then there's a register button. Hope to see you there. I'm going to be there. And if you're coming from this area, let me know. I think I have one person already who wants to come. I'm driving down early in the morning, bringing coffee with me to give to people who love coffee. And then I am driving back that same day. So I'll get home tired and want a really long bath, but I'm excited to learn about grafting. I've never really learned how to graft. Like, I've just sort of attached some things to other things, and sometimes it works and doesn't. So, like, learning the proper process is just exciting for me. Next up, we have Tales from the Prepper Pantry. It's so easy to stock your pantry, and it's not always easy to remember to eat the food from it. And the reason we have this section is, well, one, it motivates me to remember to eat my food. And two, I'm sharing with you how we're using what sounds like the same thing all the time, but in different ways. Because one of the things about food stores, you want to store what you eat and eat what you store. But the things that, like the sort of the, I don't know, meat and potatoes of a homestead, there are some things that you grow on your homestead that you'll have year over year, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, green beans, corn. Now, if you're paleo, you might not have that whole list of things, but you'll have a similar list, and you'll find that you get great abundance in some years. Lots and lots of, kale came out this year or something, and it ends up in your pantry. And it's really easy to not feel motivated to look at something when there's a lot of it in there. But there are so many exciting ways that you can cook the same kind of foods in different ways that we thought adding the Tales from the Prepper Pantry would help everybody use what they have, but also look at your pantry at home. If you're in the city, look at your pantry in a little bit different way, like what do I eat every day, and then how can I put that on a rotation, which then gives me the freedom to buy things on sale, for example, and save a little money. Or if snow is coming, not have to run out to the store and be a stereotypical Tennessean and buy milk and bread. I don't know what people do with all that milk and bread. I have decided they're making bread pudding. That's just my thought. So first up, we have the weekly squash, week number 8. I might grow less squash next year after this whole series of the weekly squash. I did go into the prepper pantry and the spaghetti squash was rotting. So I failed. I wasted probably 3 or 4 spaghetti squash this year. And however, all is not lost. I took the spaghetti squash and found somewhere in my land where I thought they might grow well and just put the rotting squash there. And, if the chickens or ducks go over there and eat some, that's fine. But under the hopes that some of those seeds will germinate, because you're just letting them break down in their natural way. And that is how squash works, right? And that we'll get more spaghetti squash vines. So hopefully we'll have some spaghetti squash. I had already done that in my garden with the first one that rotted. But Nicole did not do a good job of eating her spaghetti squash instead of pasta, and it's kind of showing in my pant size too. So the next idea for the squash of the week is the Cushaw squash pie. What's a Cushaw squash, you ask? Well, this is one of the most satisfying squashes to grow. It tastes a lot like a butternut squash, but it gets really, really big in your garden. It gets 20 pounds big. Huge squash, and they last really well in the prepper pantry. And cooking one's a major commitment because once you cut into it, you need to cook it. So what we do is we cut it in half and scoop out the seeds, and we roast it on 2 different cookie sheets. Like, these things are so big, 1/2 per cookie sheet. We roast it in the oven until it's squishy. And then we scoop out the pulp and save it for future squash projects. We also sometimes I'll cut some smaller pieces off and roast it with garlic and onion and olive oil, just like I do butternut squash, and it makes a pretty good side dish. However, if you are a fan of pumpkin pie, and you don't have any more pumpkins, but you have a Cushaw squash, you can totally use this as the pulp content of your pumpkin pie recipe. So that's just my thought on how to use a pie that's a little bit different. I'm probably this week going to mix it with some cheesecake and make a little treat for Mark and me to celebrate the end of the paper and the dedication we have to this business by spending our Valentine's Day finishing it up. The other thing that happened in the pantry this week is that one of my onions started growing, And I'm going to go cut it so it has like a big stem coming out. It's about a foot long. It's just I saw the stem sitting out of the box. The onion's fine. I'm going to cut the lower half of that onion and put the other half in the garden and see what happens. So that's going to be my fun little experiment. It'll probably grow another onion. They will do that. So we'll see if it works. We are putting a sweet potato in every salad. We're grating them up along with the Jerusalem artichokes and putting them in the salads. I still have 2 boxes of sweet potatoes. And it is now time to start eating them up. They will last into May or June before they get funky usually, especially if you're screening them, every week or every 2 weeks for any that have started to go bad. I do tend to try to prioritize the sweet potatoes in the boxes that look like they might go bad, which means it has a brown spot that I can cut out. Use that one first. So they are really good grated on salad. It's kind of like adding a carroty experience without as strong of a carrot flavor. And sweet potatoes do not need to be cooked in order for you to eat them. So that's good. We are doing salad corn again because I am bound and determined to get through my Cornmageddon canning episode with the corn either fed to Mark and me or our friends, or in worst case scenario, the chickens. But hopefully we won't have to do that. And then the other thing we're doing is pottage. I talked to you a little bit about the Holler Homestead stew, Holler stew as it is known by people. And all that Holler stew is, I usually have a stew going every week. I took a couple weeks off of stew, but like even in the summer, we have stews going with whatever's fresh, whatever I find, and some sort of meat-like thing. And this week, because of the paper, I wandered out to the freezer and saw a bunch of different bones here and there with meat on them and put them all together in the pot. And what it was some lamb. I had some lamb soup bones. I had 2 goat legs, like the front legs, which don't have a lot of meat on them. And then I had some beef stew meat just sitting there. So I took all of that mess and threw it into the crock pot with an onion and let it go for a whole day on low. And then I cut all the meat off the bones and threw the bones away and cubed up the stew meat from the beef. I didn't actually put the stew meat from the beef in until the bones had cooked. And put that back in the pot and cut up onions and potatoes and sweet potatoes. And then I also added canned corn and beans, which I boiled first on the stove in their own liquid for 5 minutes because that's what we do to safely eat our canned goods. Put that in there too with some curry spice and some other spices and let that go for, I think it was 4 hours on low in the crock pot. And then didn't even salt it. I told people, add the salt if you want it because I'm busy. And that's really, it turned out really good. And we are eating that over some pre-made rice we have. And it's really good with freshly diced onion and salad greens because I went back to the store and got some salad greens because we weren't getting enough salady, greeny stuff lately. And that is the weekly Holler stew. Reports are that it's a good one. And, people who have been here recently and have been hungry have noticed that I hand them a bowl of stew quickly because, well, stew's really easy to make and it's good and satisfying and it's what we make a lot out of our prepper pantry. Now, next week's stew will not be a curry flavored stew. It will probably be some other flavor of stew. I might go green chili stew. That's how we keep that interesting. And you could feel like you're having stew day after day, but when we have friends nearby, it doesn't feel so badly because it doesn't go the whole week. It goes about half the week. Okay. The other thing we have to do in our prepper pantry now is something about the sprouting potatoes. It's only February. They are starting to eye out, and I've already put all of my potatoes in the ground, and so I guess I can keep some in case a late freeze comes and kills the potato plants that are in the ground now. But other than that, I just need to eat these puppies up. So I am doing some research this week, and I will share with you next week the various ways we might go about preserving our potatoes. I know you can can them. I know you can dry them. Those are the 2 ways we've preserved them in the past. You can also probably scald them and freeze them. But I'll share with you probably 5 ways to deal with your potatoes so you can still use them. I bought, I think, 3 boxes of potatoes for Mark and me for the whole winter in October. We have 2 boxes left. I have put potatoes in the ground. We fed everybody lots of mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. I don't know why we're going through fewer potatoes than we used to. I think Mark maybe hasn't been having his usual eggy, potatoey breakfast thing. So oddly enough, I bought the exact amount of potatoes I thought we needed, and we haven't gone through them. So we'll see where this goes. And then the last thing about my prepper pantry is that somebody gave me a bunch of pumpkin beer, which I love. I don't love the beer. It's a good beer. It's a drinkable beer. It's not like sickly sweet, but we ended up with a lot of pumpkin beer in there, and I think it's time to start using it up because it's been there since September. So I might start offering people who stop by a pumpkin beer when they come, or I may have one from time to time myself. This is the fun part about a pantry is when somebody gives you something like that, because it was left over from a party, by the way. You have somewhere to put it. However, it doesn't always mean you drink it. So we are ready for end of times with pumpkin beer. Next up, and the last segment before our main show content, is stories from the holler. We have a sinkhole. I was walking with Mark after dark because it was so beautiful. I think it was Tuesday night. It might have been Monday night. No, it was not Monday. Tuesday or Wednesday. And he's like, you need to come out and go on a walk. And he was right. It was beautiful outside. And nighttime walks are kind of fun around here because there isn't a lot of light pollution. So I'm walking along, and he starts saying, watch out, right as I fall on my face. And I'm really lucky I didn't break my ankle, but a sinkhole had opened up in my yard that's just about as big as my foot. It's not very big, but it's very deep. And I was walking, and my toe went into it. So like the heel was on the land, toe went into the sinkhole. And luckily, it wasn't like a side of the ankle thing or something else, which really messed me up because it was my right foot, which already has had a broken ankle. And I just went straight on my face in the mud. And he laughed at me because I wasn't hurt. And as I started looking around, I realized it's been a really, really wet winter here. And as it turns out, there are 3 other sinkholes opening up in my property. So that's always a fun thing about Tennessee. When we went and toured the dam near our house, the Army Corps calls it Crappy Rock. That's what they call it in their presentations. And what it is that the rock that's underneath us is, it's eroding. And when rock erodes underground, you sometimes have sinkholes. So if you ever hear this episode that from me that my whole house was swallowed up, that actually probably could happen because I'm pretty sure we're built on a cave. And if the cave ever collapses, we're going down, just like the Corvettes did in the Corvette Museum. Next up, we had a visit. We had a special visitor, and this is someone who knows more about soil than anybody I've ever met. His name is Mike Vertreese, and he stopped in to visit, and it was really fun. This is just like typical, hey, I'll come over for an hour on my way through, because he was driving by. And we have a mutual friend who's living here now, who's in town, and he wanted to just, come see my place, and hadn't seen him in person in a while. And next thing we knew, 4 hours had gone by. And this is kind of funny because what happens when you sit down with people who care about things you do, like homesteading and permaculture and building your own business, is you think you're going to visit them for an hour, but then you visit them for 4. And he walked the property and kind of saw some of the things we're dealing with. I got to show him the sinkhole. It was just a really fun visit, and I'm glad he stopped in, and I'm really hoping to tap into some of his soil expertise as we move beyond the crisis mode here and into forward momentum. The other thing that happened this week is Cece, our dog, disappeared. She just went away, didn't come home. And we looked and looked and looked, and by that night, and of course it was the coldest night, by that night, she wasn't home, and Mark and I were kind of already starting to think, uh-oh. And because there have been coyotes nearby, and it's our smallest dog. The other 2 dogs were home. And the next morning, she still wasn't back, and I looked for her. And Mark and I looked for her all day long. And towards the end of the day, I hear a woof, and it was our dog back. So we put her in her little crate, fed her, all the things you do when your dog returns. Next day, let her out with the puppy, and they disappeared again. So at first I thought maybe somebody let her into their house because it was cold, or maybe she ran off and got lost and then heard us calling, like what could have happened? Well, this highlights the importance of being in touch with your community. When I lost her the first time, I put her picture out on the internet, and we have some local Facebook groups. And my friends, I love them. They shared her picture far and wide. I was like, if anybody finds this dog, I'm totally getting my dog back. Well, that went around, and then I told everybody I found her. Then she disappeared again. I get tagged that same day in a Facebook post. Picture of my dogs. Anybody missing these dogs? They had gone, I don't know, 2-3 miles to a nearby marina and had been hanging out there all day. And somebody finally took a picture of them and put it on Facebook. And then one of my friends who had been sharing that picture of her the day before tagged me because they knew it was my dog. And sure enough, my dogs, apparently what really happened is the little dog went over to the marina, met somebody she likes. She loves to visit people, hung out with them, eventually came home, brought the other dog over to meet the people, and were basically making a nuisance of themselves. So now we have this whole, like, how do we contain our dogs now that they've figured out they can go over there? They have to cross a highway. So I don't know. It was just kind of a funny little thing that happened and does highlight the importance of being tapped into your community, because if I had not had the relationships to share that photo, and if people had not already been looking for her, they probably, that I would not have seen that post, because I wasn't thinking to look in a Cookeville Facebook group for dogs that are nowhere near Cookeville. So, and I would have never known. They just would have stayed at this marina for a few more days. And of course, they got out without their tags on. So that's always the way that goes, right? Next up, wanted to talk about duck eggs. This is something I see. This is my first year having a lot of ducks. I had 7 last year. Now I have more. And they've started laying eggs, which is super exciting. As I said, the egg shares are up and off the ground. I went into the coop 2 days ago, no eggs. And I was like, Whiskey, Tango, Foxtrot. What happened? Maybe it got cold. And then I looked and I saw a little bit of an egg in the back of their most difficult to reach part of their coop. I went back and grabbed it with my hand. I was like crawling on my hands and knees to get to it, which is, by the way, pretty gross in a duck coop. And my hand touched another egg. And it turns out that my ducks are bearing their eggs now. They've started bearing their eggs. It probably means one of them wants to become a mother. And I'll probably let that happen at some point. But instead of just dropping their eggs wherever, which is what they were doing, like I just find them in the coop all over. They're all in a little nest. They're all buried under the wood shavings. And I found a dozen eggs. And it actually kind of highlights the importance of why we candle all our duck eggs before we sell them. Because who knows how long those eggs had been there, right? You can't see inside an egg. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it growing a little creature? I'm really glad I got an egg candler. I took all the eggs in and got them set up and ready to go for the candler, cleaned them off, and looked at them, and all of them looked good. And it kind of, highlights the importance of knowing how to candle eggs. And I'm still learning. Like, I've had this test egg on the counter for a while just to see what happens over time. What I've found out is that you can see an air pocket starting to form in an egg. So, like, the egg is still good, and it evaporates through the shell, the liquid does. And so its air pockets are forming in there, and if it's a big air pocket, that's an egg I don't sell to a client. Or I can also tell if there are any sort of developmental things going on. I've candled eggs when I incubated eggs, so I know what that looks like. And none of them were probably all laid that day or the day before. None of those are eggs that I'm selling because who knows, but I did candle them, and then we've been eating those since that day, and they're pretty good, and none of them have been bad, and in fact, I'm sure the majority of them were laid that day. So that's just a reason. If you are raising ducks, make sure you get a candler and learn how to use it. And one of the things I'm doing is I am letting an egg go rotten right now. It might take 90 days, but I'm looking at it every day and just looking at how the yolk changes in there and what else happens. What I believe will happen when I finally have a rotten egg is it'll just be a big dark goo, which is how it kind of looks when you have in an incubator. You can kind of see the little baby birds forming, and the first thing that happens is there's a blood vessel that you can start seeing. So if you candle an egg and see a blood vessel, that one means that a life has started. That's obviously not one that you would sell. If it doesn't get to that point, then it just goes bad. And however, it's kind of hard to see that. Over time, with a good egg that is developing a little poultry, you can start seeing the poultry developing. It's kind of neat. The bad eggs do just kind of get dark and don't move. So my favorite part is when you start seeing the heartbeat. But that's a totally different story. So, as far as back to the egg business, I'm candling every egg because the worst thing that could happen to me is I give somebody a bad egg or, something else, an unexpected surprise. Somebody told me a story about how they were cracking farm fresh eggs and one of them was a bird. That's never going to happen here because I'm looking on the inside of every egg that we sell just to make sure. And with that, let's talk about priorities, or more importantly, 4 strategies to make it through your busy spring without killing your spouse, turning to drink, throwing up your hands up in the air and giving up, or going back to your corporate servitude if you've already walked off the job and been lucky enough to live off your land. We're not living completely off our land yet. So here we go. Strategy number 1. This is the hardest one. Maybe not the hardest one, but it's the most important one. And that is get real. If you're going to make it through your spring, you need to get real right now because getting real halfway through isn't good enough. You need to get real on your garden plans and your homestead plans. And this means you, my anonymous friend in Missouri, who has just gotten land for his or her first homestead and is going to be working in the city while somebody else starts it. Remember when I told you to go big with your garden planning and then back off? Now is the time to back off. This is the time to get real with what you can really sustain. And I think you were telling me you're going to do chickens this year. Just do them. Do your chickens really, really well. Make that your one thing. And then maybe do 1 or 2 square foot gardens or a very, very small garden bed. But do your chickens really, really well. Because the first year on the homestead is the hardest. And getting real on the homestead is hard. And building that habit into your life is hard. When I think about the list I spouted off last week about everything we have to do, I realized that I was starting to overwhelm myself on the last episode. And I had to go back to my basics. The magical number is 3. So I looked at the list from last week and I chose 3 things I was really going to get done. And we did those. And you know what? It's okay to just choose one. Like if your thing is fix the greenhouse and it's going to take you the whole bloody week to do it, that you can just have one thing. Well, last week I chose 3 things, one of which was planting potatoes. And I did get that done. And it only took 10 minutes. Like that's the funny part. Because my beds are ready to go. That only took 10 minutes. But if I hadn't, chosen the potatoes, cut the potatoes, let them harden off, and then been ready for that 10 minutes, because it wasn't on the list, and then I was just putting unhardened off potatoes in the ground. That's how that would have gone. It would have been 3 weeks from now. Cut in half your current garden plans, unless you are a seasoned garden planner. When we dream big about our gardens and are like, I want this tomato and that kale and that corn, and we're going to put it here and there and we tend to overplan or plan too much. And unless you've been doing your garden year over year over year, you may find yourself, one year I ended up with 140 tomatoes, by the way. Last year I had 8 plants, and that was enough to can all the tomatoes we needed for the year. So at least in half, especially if it's a new year. And you can actually put more plants in less space if you companion plant. Like you think about what plants do well together and plant them near each other. I actually throw a few carrot seeds in around my tomatoes just for fun. I don't usually get carrots from them, but every so often I do. Or nasturtium. Nasturtium is a great tasting peppery salad addition. It's a flower and it does well near your tomatoes. So just think about, okay, I'm cutting this in half, and how can I plant things close together that are beneficial to one another? And then take 10 minutes to look at your journal from last year and seek out trends. This is something that's really important on the homestead, is keeping that journal so that okay, last year when I was losing my mind in August, this is what I observed and this is what I thought I might do differently. So for me, I've already looked at my journal And this is what I am doing this year that's a little bit different. One, we have a tomato schedule. Last year, I did put my tomatoes in very late. They were really good. And then they did what they do every year, which is the blight came and they died. It kind of happened during the drought. I wonder if I had, I don't know, given them some water, if they may have made it through. But it was kind of nice last year because we didn't have as wet of a summer, which meant the blight didn't really take hold. But what I realized was that it would be better to have, my May planting, my mid-July planting, and my September planting of tomatoes to keep tomatoes extended into the season, into the fall, rather than just like all up front, early summer tomatoes and then nothing. So that's what I got out of my journal. I was thinking that last year. I had totally forgotten until I looked back at it. The other thing, similar to the tomato schedule, is I'm going to do an early planting this year. I don't usually do that because it usually dies. But I'm planning for an early planting followed by a later planting, with the exception of my squash, because squash bugs. But that means right now I'm putting things in the ground that I wouldn't usually, like the potatoes. Like, I'm prepared for my potatoes to die with additional seed potatoes. They're in the ground, and if we do well, that's great. If we get some freeze, I can put some row cover over it, and they'll be fine. The things that in fact, I'm starting my tomatoes this week in flats for an earlier transplant than usual. And then in 2 months, I'll start some more tomatoes in flats for that. So you see how that works? So it's starting to turn into, I can almost say what we're doing each week. And that makes me feel a little less panicked. The other thing I'm doing this year is cardboard. I have access to wonderful free cardboard without any printing on it. Woo! And guess what? In between my rows or my beds in the garden, I get a lot of weed growth, and I kind of mow it back. But this year we're going to see what happens if I put cardboard on top of it and weight that cardboard down. I don't know if I'm going to put wood chips on that or just hold it down with bricks, but I'm trying to see if I can not have to do as much trimming of things this year. So we're trying cardboard. I've gone back and forth on, do I have beds with grass walkways or not? And I usually end up with a grass walkway, but I'm looking at some other gardens in the area and realizing that they don't have grass between their beds, therefore they don't have as much grass in their beds. So we'll see how that goes. And then creating more shade. Last year I became aware that shade is my friend. I made these arches out of cattle panels and planted things on them, and then planted things in the middle of the arch, and those things did really well, including squash and tomatoes and things that say they want full sun. As it turns out, 12 hours of ridiculously strong Tennessee sun is not necessarily what your full sun plants want, except for maybe your okra. And my plants that had some shade did a little better. So as I've been reading, 4 to 6 hours is fine for how much full sun you get. And we will be building shade. It's two strategies. I can put shade cloth out on posts, and I might. But the other thing I can do is plant taller plants near shorter plants. Or I have some elderberry growing in my garden, which most people wouldn't let grow, but I will. It shades I had a wonderful shade salad garden last year because of elderberry. So just looking at ways to integrate shade, but not all the time. And then finally, what I've realized I need to do is block weekly time in the garden, just like I do for this podcast. I record this podcast pretty much at the same time every Monday, and it happens every week because I do that. So learning from that, I am taking time. I'm going to find a time every week that I viciously defend where I can spend a few hours in the garden, because I have a stupid property design where the route I take every morning is to the ducks to get the eggs. In the opposite direction is my garden. I will be moving the ducks at some point. It's not like an urgent thing right now. And that means that I don't build the garden into my morning walk as I should, especially if I'm feeling under pressure, like there's a newspaper deadline today. And so I'm just going to have to block the time, and we'll see how that goes. Maybe I won't be as underwater by July as I was last year. And then finally, under the category of get real, if you don't have a journal from last year, if this is your first year or you just didn't do a journal, go to the dollar store or wherever, buy a notebook and start one. Write in it at least once a week. What you want to write in there is, like I like to list the plants I put in, but you don't have to. I like to make observations about, the squash bugs came this week and I tried this and that didn't work, or wow, lots of tomatoes, woohoo! Things like that. Observations about the weather, like it's been really wet, or anything that has to do with your land. Write it in that journal, because that becomes a treasure trove for the next year. And as you're writing, it kind of opens up your creative mind, and you'll start saying, you know what, next year I want to try this. If you're in the garden and you're like, wow, this really didn't work, I'm never doing this again, write that in your journal. So that is a really good way when you have to get to the get real phase next year. You have your journal to help you get real. Okay, strategy number 2. Take a step back and breathe. When you feel overwhelmed, remind yourself to visit the 3 changes that you agreed to make with yourself earlier this year. If you listen to episode 18, it was about 3 things you can do to make forward momentum. So when you're getting overwhelmed, that usually means you're doing more than those 3 things. And the habit that we get into, or the temptation, is to run forward and do more. I'm going to do more, better. More things equals better, right? No, it doesn't. And so when you find yourself overwhelmed, that is the time to stop. And, you set a timer for half an hour. Breathe, take a walk, whatever it is you need, a bath, whatever you need to do. And then go back and look at what you decided was the one thing you want to do best this year. What is that one thing? And if you're overwhelmed, is that related to the one thing, or is it off topic? Remember to take your weekly time to reflect on your progress. Are you taking forward momentum? If sometimes when we're overwhelmed, it's because we don't think we're getting anywhere. And if we just take a minute to say, actually last week I got my potatoes planted. My garden might still have weeds in it. All my beds are not ready for spring, but by gum, I got my potatoes planted. And that's better than nothing. Like, that's moving me towards one of the things I'm working on this year, right? Okay. And then remember that the small things are the most important. And think to yourself, I'm overwhelmed. What's one small thing I can do that will help? Whatever it is. I like to help other people personally, so I'll do a small thing there. Or is it planning one meal in advance that helps you have that healthy meal one time this week? Or is it taking the time to call a friend you haven't talked to in a while? It could be like those little things may have nothing to do with your one thing from the outside, but they end up having everything to do with it in the long term. Like my long-term goal for the Holler Homestead has started moving forward because I've taken time to interact with people who I didn't know it, but who are going to end up probably helping me here on this project just by, suggestions or showing up or, any of the number of things. Like I have a friend who did the one small thing he did wasn't so small. He came out and helped me catch a swarm of bees and moved it to my house. And I became a beekeeper that day. That was, in some senses, in the grander scheme of the year, it was one day of his life. In the grand scheme of my year, it was like opening up a whole new world. So sometimes those little things that you're doing open up whole new worlds for people. And that just means being open to doing it, but remembering that you do the one small thing and not the little things all the time and, lose your focus, right? Because back to that one goal, what is your one goal? So strategy number 2 is really when you're feeling overwhelmed, take a step back, breathe, remember your one goal, and then ask yourself, is what I'm doing now getting me to that goal? Now, I also understand that if the animals are hurt and need to go to the vet and it's not your one thing, you still need to take them to the vet. Or if you have strep throat and you need to deal with that. So there are things that we have to deal with every day that are not necessarily moving us towards our one thing. except for maybe they are, right? Like your health is moving you towards your one thing. So that's this, it's the hardest part to do. I actually think this is the hardest one, is breathing and pausing when all you feel like is I better run faster or I'm never making it. Okay, ready for strategy number 3? This is the list of minimums. This is the opposite of what every overachiever in the world wants to do. It is the must-have versus nice-to-have. This list of minimums is everything that really has to get done. And this is also hard to do. The way you do this is you make a list of everything that has to be done. And my average list size for a list of minimums starts at 50. And then I put a time limit on it. I'll say by the end of the week, what really has to be done on this list. And I cross things off. And in order to be successful on the Holler Homestead, what really needs to be done on this list, I cross things off. And usually by that time, it's down to about 20. Okay, and out of these 20 things, what things have to be done today? And usually I end up with 5. And then I look at the other 15. And I usually realize that those other 15 also don't need to be done that week. And some of them don't even really have to be done for us to be successful here. And that 5 things becomes my list of minimums. If I can get it down to 3, that's even better. When I have a list of 5, I try really hard to get rid of 2 more because 3 is the magic number that I can remember. And that's why last week when I had 15 things to do on the homestead, I chose 3 for the week. That was my list of minimums, right? So your list of minimums is about becoming honest with yourself and determining the most important things you can do. And you do those first. So when I had my 3 things, I was like, okay, this is what has to be done or we're going to fail. And I did them. And I did them first. And I did them early. And then they were done. And once they were done, guess what happened? I had all this time where I wasn't worried about those 3 things, where I did all this other stuff that was on there. And I got a whole bunch of stuff done without losing my mind. And I often find the list of minimums is also the 3 things I want to do least, but that are very important. And when I do the things I want to do least first, everything else gets easier. The other part of the list of minimums is you need to trust your gut on putting things off. If you still haven't moved your blueberry bushes after it's been on the list for 4 weeks, there's something in that. There's a sign. That might just mean that blueberries are not your priority. It might just mean there are more important things. And you know what? You might just take it off your list entirely. And guess what might happen because you do that? You might kill your blueberry bushes. But you have to ask yourself with something like that, why did I just put it off for 4 weeks? Oh, well, because, eggs and sales and blah, 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 blah. Oh, the things I'm working on are more linked to my one thing, which is establishing more local sustainable income for us. And blueberries are not. 3 blueberry bushes are not going to make me financial. Okay, so you see where you go with that, right? I actually got really harsh on this year. I had 6,000 emails in my inbox in December. And on January 1st, I had 0. Guess how I did that? Basically, the most recent 50 emails I answered. The next 50 emails I scanned and answered a few. And the rest of them I deleted. And that may seem really harsh, but I had email in my inbox from 2010 that had never been answered. And I am not proud to admit that, but they were from 2010. It's 2017, man. It's been 7 years. If I answer that now, the person's going to think I'm crazy anyway. So I just pulled the trigger. I was like, and I sent an email to my staff. I said, if you're waiting for an answer from me on an email and you have not gotten it as of today, resend me that email. And I got 0 emails from my staff. I ended up getting 2 later that week when they understood what I meant by that question, right? I had deleted everything. And nobody died. No projects were delayed. Everything got done, and I am no longer worried about 6,000 unanswered emails. In fact, I've been able to get my email box down to about 10 every week since that happened. And I didn't just do it on my work email. The 4,000 in my personal email, also gone. The 2,000 in the newspaper email, also gone. Now, I do have archives of them. I can go find them. But that was really hard for me to pull the trigger on, and it was the best thing I could have done. So think about it in the framework of your homestead, right? You've got a list a mile long of all the things you need to do. Some of them are never going to get done. And who cares? We can always do more to have the perfect homestead, but when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to be like, man, I wish I would have put up more fencing. You know? Man, I wish I would have had more goats. Maybe I will have, but it's part of this whole homestead lifestyle is the lifestyle. It's not about working your fingers to the bone without having fun. And the other thing about the list of minimums is, if like me, you have a personal strategic plan, I have one. It's personal and family together, and it bridges what I'm doing at my full-time job. It's bridging what I do at the paper. It bridges what I do at the homestead. I have 3 things that I focus on in all of those. And it was really hard to bring it down to 3. One of them is my own health. I was not prioritizing my health. One of them is that I don't recreate. And I don't go have fun. I forgot how to have fun for a while there. I was so busy starting businesses that, I mean, it's fun to start a business, don't get me wrong. But I forgot to go have fun with Mark. And so that's on my list. Go have fun with Mark. And in fact, next week, I think I'm going to go on a little trip because of that. And we're going to go hiking. So instead of planting my plants or getting my tomatoes started, I'm going to go hiking. And that's in my strategic plan. That means that hike just made the list of minimums. Okay. Last strategy of the day. Strategy 4. This is the most important one. It's not the hardest one. It's not the most tragic one. It's the most important one. Have some fun, man. You are walking out onto a living off the land lifestyle. It can be the best thing or the worst thing for you. If all you do is stress out about being overwhelmed in spring and getting all the things done, you're not going to have fun on your homestead. Like, why are you out here? Are you out here to take some time and look at the stars at night? Are you here to have a new lifestyle? Are you here to go take a hike in your area? Like, why are you here? Of course, I mean, like, I consider it fun to spend the day in my garden pulling weeds, by the way. I go out there, I'm barefoot in the summer, and I just sit my rear end down straight on the dirt. I don't even care about getting dirty. And I love that, and it's calming. But there are other things I love to do, too. And having fun as part of your homestead adventure is what makes it into a lifestyle you're going to want to continue to be in. And I think when you have fun, you have the stories to tell people. And those stories, if you're going to be going into a homestead experience where you're depending on sales, people want to hear your story, and they don't want to always hear, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. However, I don't hide when I'm overwhelmed. You know, I think having, the best part about rural living is the access to all the wonderful things. We have a new wildlife hike here. There is a new state, I think it's a state wildlife preserve. And this is kind of funny when people out west try to tell me that the federal lands have to be managed by the feds because otherwise they're just going to go away. And I look at Tennessee and I see how many new state parks are being added. I'm like, maybe not. Maybe private people will sell this, there's all these things going on. I'm not, most of you who know me know I'm not pro state control of anything. We'll just put it that way. And I think things can happen privately. And we have this new wildlife hike that the person who owns it was like, you know what? I want people to be able to enjoy this. So they've made arrangements it's called Window Cliffs, and it's going to become, people have been going there. They've been letting people go there for a long time, I guess, but because you can be sued if people are hurt on your property. I mean, I don't know why they're doing it, but a lot of times that's what people do. They have turned it over to become a state preserve, and I'm going to go. It's 4 miles of tough hiking, and you go see this place where erosion has caused a window to be cut through cliffs, and then it's 4 miles of rough hiking back. I'm so excited, and the worst time for me to go on this hike in context of my homestead is next week. Totally going next week. Well, maybe not next week if I'm not allowed to yet. We'll see. And kayaking. I like kayaking. I like swimming. In the summertime, there are so many demands on the homestead that it's hard to go kayaking and swimming. I go anyway. Nick Ferguson came out and checked out my property, by the way. He saw lots of weeds. Part of that was like, because I'm not just going to be here all the time. I'm going to go kayaking. Going to go out to sushi with Mark. We love sushi. I know how to make it. Sometimes I just want to go out to eat, though, right? And we build that into our budget. And, somebody gave us access to a cabin for a couple days, and it's the off season, and it's probably 40 miles from here, and I'm hoping to find a house sitter next week. I'll just put it that way, and go away for 3 days. Like, all of those things are part of having fun, and the other ways I have fun is on the homestead. 2 weeks ago, people came over to help a friend. I got to cook for those people, and we had a great time. That's having fun. We got to walk the property. I got to show them the piles of shame, the things I started and never finished. I actually have one of my chicken tractor failures, like rotting in the yard. I was like, that's the chicken tractor that didn't work. And, I'm having fun with it rather than being upset. That's the most important part of all of this. Is getting through your spring without killing your spouse means have fun with your failures as well as your successes. Because you're going to have successes. You're going to have lots of successes. I've got all these awesome eggs coming on, by the way, where my poultry wanders around in my yard and eats bugs. And because they eat the bugs, I don't have huge tick problems. And they eat the grass. And because they eat the grass, we're probably going to mow less this year. Like, there's all these things going on that are successes. And occasionally I have a dog that runs off and doesn't come home, or that unlearns that she's not supposed to go after the ducks. Luckily, I caught her before she killed the duck. So, there are failures too. And sometimes you'll go out of town and you'll have a house sitter, and like, this always happens. Like, the raccoon sees our car go away with our suitcases, and it closes in that night and kills a chicken, and my poor house sitter's really upset. And I'm like, I didn't want to lose the chicken either, but I wasn't expecting you to sit out in the chicken coop with the gun. So anyway, those are my 4 strategies. I'll just go back through as a reminder. Strategy number 1 this spring is get real. You've got all your plans, now get real with them. 2, take a step back and breathe if you get overwhelmed, and then take a minute to link what you're doing to your number 1 priority. Step number 3, make your list of minimums and make it short, and no excuses, man. Get it done. And then strategy number 4, don't forget to have fun. Okay, if you liked the show or hated it, or want to tell me something or whatever, drop me an email, NicoleSauce@gmail.com, or add thoughts and questions over at livingfreeintennessee.com. We'll take your questions there too. I only look there a couple times a day, but if I see a comment, I comment back. And soon, very, 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 very soon, we're going to be announcing something new here for all of you. What is it? I don't know. Can't tell you yet, but if you want to be the first to know, go over to livingfreeintennessee.com, sign up for the occasional updates on our email page. The email sign-up page apparently had a glitch that I fixed, but it's ready to go, and it allows you to choose, like, if you want lots of updates, like every time an episode comes out, if you just want occasional updates, which are announcements, but they don't, maybe once a month maximum, probably more like once every other month, or if you want to hear about events and workshops. And those are not just ones we're doing, those are ones that, like the Cider Hollow event, it's going to be a good one, and it seems like something we want to support. And in fact, if you're listening to this going, why aren't you promoting my Middle Tennessee event? Well, maybe I don't know about it. Drop me an email. Anyway, the occasional updates is where we will be announcing some of the new things that are going to be happening here soon. So if you want to hear before everybody else, before I even announce it on the podcast, go over there and sign up for occasional updates. Well, friends, spring is one of the busiest times here, right? Now, who am I fooling? Fall is, right? No, actually, we only really get to slow down a little bit in the winter, and even then, I feel like we're fighting the ice so much or the cold that it hasn't really slowed down. And now, with lots of projects piling up, it's really easy to get overwhelmed, especially when spring just landed a month sooner than I was planning. Yet sometimes all this worrying about getting things done is worse than just choosing the one thing you need to do and doing it. And you never want to go into a situation like that at the expense of your health, happiness, and relationships. So I want to thank you for joining me today on Living Free in Tennessee. And guys, go out and make it a great week.
Insecure.